Hey everybody, my name is Madden. I'm the CEO of Bridge21. We help individuals and businesses send money from the United States to Mexico. And what makes us a little bit different is we do that with blockchain and digital currencies instead of international wires. So quickly about me, my background was at Western Union. I worked there for a little over 16 years and then started Bridge21 in 2014. I learned about Bitcoin and blockchain really early. My job at Western Union was to stay on top of emerging technologies. So in about 2010, that's when I really went down the rabbit hole. So I have a lot of historical context. So if you have questions about digital currency in general, I can answer that too for the Q&A. So please, what I'm saying is, please feel free to ask a range of questions, even if it's a little bit off the topic of cross-border payments. What I'm going to talk about today is really just my experience building Bridge21 over the last 4 years, what we've learned with blockchain and cross-border payments, some of what I think are the cool kind of emerging technologies that are coming out in the space, and then some of the risks to it as well. And then there will be, again, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the end for questions. So if you think of anything, you save it for the end and we can get into it. So, without further ado, I don't know if this thing is working. There we go. Let's see. Well, it's okay. There we go. So we live in a world where you can talk to somebody on the other side of the planet instantly and for free, and you don't really give it a second thought anymore. Text message, email. But and this lady doesn't give it a second thought either. But think about this: what happens when you need to pay somebody in that other country? And what you very quickly realize is that in a lot of cases, it's still faster and cheaper in 2018. In some cases, to put money in an envelope and mail it to another country than it is to try to pay with a bank wire or to pay online. And why is that? Why hasn't the speed of money kept up with the speed of technology? Cross-border payments have increased 50 times over since the 70s, which greatly outpaces the rate of inflation. But the technology that we're using to move the money really fundamentally hasn't changed since SWIFT was invented back in the 70s. So why is that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And just to kind of hit it on a little more, sorry, I don't know if this thing is low on batteries or what's going on here. There we go. Well, just to bring it home a little more, the cross-border payments market is, by conservative estimates, 25 trillion annually. So it's absolutely huge. If you look at just individual people sending money peer-to-peer over borders, it's over 600 billion a year. You've got hundreds of millions of migrant workers in different countries sending money back home. And the entire thing is still served by traditional money transfer operators and banks. So this growing global economy is still being served by the same rails, which is interesting. And then at the same time, as people here are aware, the digital currency asset market is coming out of nowhere, right? As of last night, the market cap on that was $220 billion. We had over $1 trillion in US dollars traded just in 2018. Hundreds of funds and institutions and large companies are now entering the space, and we've got huge returns over 5 years. And the question is, can this technology, this asset, this token economy be used to improve or reinvent this cross-border payments market? And the answer is, resounding yes. What we do at Bridge21 is we're looking for arbitrage opportunities between digital currency markets and traditional markets. And just to give you some context of what that means, if we have a business that needs to send money from the United States to Mexico, we can look at markets and say Bitcoin, for example. When Bitcoin is trading at a discount in US dollars, we'll look and see when it's trading for a premium in Mexican pesos. And by trading in two markets at the same time, you can create an international cross-border payment instantly at a lower price point than using traditional rails. So that's really what it's about. This is an example, you probably can't see it, but kind of our back office order book. If you look at a combined order book of exchanges in the United States and Mexico, this happens all the time where there are people willing to sell a cryptocurrency in the US for significantly less than people are willing to pay for it in Mexico. And you can, save 2, 3, 4, 5% and then pass those savings on to the customer and really improve the cross-border payments network. So that's kind of a window into what we do. This is our rate. So we've been operating now since late 2016, and we publish our rates on our website in the footer. We've consistently been able to beat our competition by half a basis point, 1% over time. And there have been periods where we've been off beating them by 5 or 10%. So it really does work. It's proven. And it's really interesting to see the space evolve. I think if you're interested in getting into the cross-border payment space with blockchain, there are really probably 5 areas you need to think about. The first one is you have to have a really solid go-to-market strategy. It's really hard, and it doesn't matter if it's individuals or businesses, it's really hard to change consumer behavior. So if you haven't really tested your idea and proven that you can convince people to use your brand or your network, you need to go back to step 1, because it's by far the hardest thing. We thought that was going to be easy, but it wasn't. So it took a long time. We competed on price. We would give our service away for 5% below cost. We were breaking even, but we were basically, you're sending $10,000, how'd you like to keep 500 of that? And even that isn't enough to convince a lot of people to try you out. So I think changing consumer behavior around money, businesses and individuals, it doesn't matter, is a challenge. So that's a big one. The second one is work with compliant exchanges. So the regulatory environment around blockchain is changing really, really rapidly, and if your partner in the country isn't staying on top of that, you can very quickly find yourself in a situation where they're shut down and you lose an entire corridor, like Mexico or Argentina. So you want to work with really A-list partners in the country where you're sending money, who are kind of ahead of the game with regulation. And at the same time, it's not just compliant partners, you need secure partners. Because if your partner has an information breach or it's hacked, you can lose a lot of money, and very quickly, if you're not able to capitalize, your entire business can go out of business very quickly if it's like a Mt. Gox happens or a hack happens. So you've got to be aware of that too. I think on top of that, really 3 and 4 go together. Higher volume is good because it evens out volatility, but at the same time, the more volume you have, the less opportunity there is for arbitrage. So it's kind of a balance of mixing the volume and the volatility of the arbitrage opportunity against how much money can you move through an exchange. And then the last one is really don't underestimate payment fraud, especially in the United States. So if you're setting up a fintech, I talked to so many financial technology startups, and what happens is they launch their company, they do a little bit of marketing, and suddenly they have hundreds or maybe thousands of customers. And they're thinking, we're going to be the next PayPal, we're going to be billionaires, we're going to head out of the park. And what they don't realize is it's actually payments fraud. So there are really, really sophisticated, organized criminal groups that do nothing but buy information that's stolen off the darknet, sign up for these little naive fintechs, and then steal money from people they're impersonating. The fintechs think that they're getting a huge initial burst of business, but really what's happening is the person that's really paying for it figures it out, refers to the payment a couple of weeks later, and the fintech's out of business. So, I'll share more than I should. I was looking through our numbers a couple of weeks ago. We make 1% as our fee, we've eked out about 1.6% trading profit. We lost a full 0.5% on that 2.6 margin, down to 2.1 just because of payments fraud. And we were careful. So it can not only relieve your margins, it can kill you. So that's probably the 5th thing. Should be up there with number 1 is payments fraud if you're going to get into this business. Threats. Sorry, this thing is really acting up today. Wrong slide. Threats to the market and what's happening really are 2 big ones. Regulation is that cryptocurrency market cap is $220 billion today. As it increases, the regulatory scrutiny is going to increase. And that can do all kinds of things. It could be like in India where the banks got together and said, look, we're not going to ban virtual currency exchangers. So that means that even though India is really tempting for us, we just can't open up there. We just can't do it. Or it can be very granular, like in New York with a bit license, where the regulatory friction of becoming licensed in that state, if you look at it, the cost benefit just doesn't add up if you're not a big bank. So regulation is definitely something to keep on top of and could become a threat. It's already wiped some markets off the map. And depending on what happens in California and some other locations, more could be on the way. I think the second, I wouldn't call it a threat, but it's more of a development. The markets where these assets trade are becoming far more sophisticated. In 2017, we had opportunities where we could buy one crypto asset and sell it for pesos and make 10%. It was a money printer. And the reason is we were trading against retail investors. There was some guy or girl who read an article in Mexico about Ethereum, got really excited and decided, I'm going to buy 100 million pesos worth of Ethereum. And they weren't thinking about what's the VWAP or what's the fair price for Ethereum globally. They were just thinking, I want to buy 100 million pesos worth of Ethereum, which creates an incredible arbitrage opportunity. What we're seeing now, especially in 2019, is that the class of trader we're trading against is completely different. Derivatives, commodities traders who do HFTs have kind of moved into the space, and they're doing delta neutral strategies where they're holding equal assets on two exchanges and then trading if things get too out of line. So we're seeing that the margins are much thinner than they were in 2017. It's not the Wild West anymore. What that means is you have less volatility, you can move more money through, but there's less money printing opportunity, I'll put it that way. Although it still does happen. So I think that really regulation and just sophistication of the traders are probably two of the biggest threats to the way we do things. In terms of interesting technology, there's just two examples. IBM's WorldWire is one. Stellar, which is a native token, working with them. Also RippleNet. They're really using their native token to build replacements for Swift. So we're seeing institutional players move in and start to really try to disintermediate Swift. And then there are other companies like Veeam, which used to be Align Commerce, which is still doing kind of what Bridge does very successfully. So there are also startups that are doing more of a direct-to-consumer play that are successful too. And then there's companies like Centwire that have kind of pivoted away and are focused. Change takes time. The phone took 50 years to reach mainstream adoption. Blockchain technology and cross-border payments is also taking a really long time. But the hope is that within our lifetimes, we'll be in a world where the way you use texting somebody in another country can also send them money. We have greater economic freedom in a global market, right, that helps everybody. And I think that's kind of the dream. So yeah, that's really the overview. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. If I can get to the last slide. Also, if you or your business do need to send money from Mexico for supply chain or for any other reason from the United States, definitely email me. We can help you save some money. Or if you know somebody else who does that, definitely would love referrals for business. But if you just want to rap about blockchain, happy to do that too for your pet project. So that's it. Questions?
Ripple and the combo IBM Stellar network as Stasis Squad. What about bridging, lack of a better word, with the Ripple network? Why not work on top of Ripple, for example, since they supposedly they have a better liquidity when it comes to cross-border, they have more corridors, not just US-Mexico, but Philippines, other places.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we trade the Ripple token day to day, so we're using them in a sense. We've talked to them extensively about could we use RippleNet or XRapid. I think for us, we've realized that just the commitment to go into a new market, it's less about the technology, it's more about the go-to-market strategy. So to go into the Philippines or going to Brazil, we would need to really develop around that, have a plan to get the customers first before we worry too much about the technology. I think a lot of companies like Bridge kind of go at things backwards and think about this grand plan for a payment network, but then don't really think about how they're going to use it. And that can work if you have a whole lot of capital, but for us, I think we're a little more surgical about what we do. That said, we have talked to them about XRapid, and we think it's really cool. They offer basically using their network. It's I can't remember 10 or 20 basis points above the market. They'll move the money and then pay it out. But really, what they're doing is connecting to exchanges like we do. And it's just that they're trading on the Ripple asset, whereas we're trading on a lot of them. So there's a little bit of duplication there, but they do have some great economies of scale. So it's something we're thinking about. I don't know if WorldWire is as broad yet, but we're watching them too.
For potential DApp application on a worldwide level, what kind of recommendations would you think to consider in terms of how you get payment for that application?
So you're thinking about a DApp that facilitates sort of cross-border payments as a sort of decentralized contract?
No, in terms of just general, I purchase your service or your application in order to use it. What would you recommend to use as a currency or to use as an exchange?
That's a really good question. So, and I hope it's not too ambiguous of an answer. I think it depends on the market. So if you're selling your application to somebody or a group that's already blockchain enthusiasts and know all about cryptocurrencies, you can probably use anything from Ethereum tokens to Ethereum to a stablecoin very easily. If you're selling it more to a mainstream market, and I think this is something Lever needs to really think about too, there's a huge psychological barrier for a lot of people. You know, they think about things, they price things in the world in terms of their national currency. And if you give them Willbucks, and Willbucks has some crazy volatile exchange rate that is foreign to them, it's a big impediment to convincing them to sort of make that change in the behavior to try your product. So you don't want to do that to yourself if you can avoid it. I think if you can, you're going for sort of a mainstream market, try to sell your product, and you can do it with stable coins. There are ways to do it, but using Oracle and Ethereum. But try to sell it in their native currency. Don't give them any more psychic work than they need to sort of conceptualize what they're buying. Don't make them do an exchange rate calculation on their calculator to buy your product. You know, but again, I think if you're selling to people that are already familiar and do that anyway, different story. You know, they might prefer it. So I'd have to know more about your application.
Great job on cross-border payments. I was wondering, what are you doing for on-ramps and off-ramps for fiat? Have you considered like using, it's called OXO, XXO, something like that? It's like a Safeway, Speedway, or Safeway 7-Eleven here in the US, but in Mexico, for people to be able to get on and off, because it sounds like you're only addressing people using exchanges.
Yeah, no, OXO's huge there. And I mean, we've looked at off-ramps for cash in Mexico, and we've looked at accepting cash at 7-Elevens in the US. I think where we've ended up is we're focusing more on larger centers and businesses, just because.
I think that would really encourage adoption, because a lot of the cross-border payments is just $100, $200.
Yeah.
And if you're just only addressing the larger companies, you miss out on a whole lot of the adoption of smaller people.
Completely agree. And I think there's opportunities on both sides, but I think you kind of have to focus your efforts. We can do both. We're not doing OXO or cash at this point, just because I think there's a little more compliance and regulatory concern around accepting and paying out cash.
Tremendous if that can happen.
Yeah, so it's different. And then you have sort of more of a granular customer. There's a certain amount of cost with every customer, right? Just verifying their identity, complying with regulations. So it's a thinner margin, with cash and those payments, but it is something we're excited about. We could do it. I know how. But so far we focus more on bank to bank.
Yeah, it's about the volume, which is made on it. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to somebody purchases something actually a lot of people use and we get adoption.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, and I think it'll take time, but I think it will happen. Yeah.
All right, perhaps one final question. Okay, I'll do it. For financial institutions that offer cross-border payment solutions to their clients, do you find that the trend is they're looking at stablecoin solutions like Paxos, Stronghold, or Tether, or are they looking at options like Bridge 21? What do you think the trend is for that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's changing, so I want to give some credit. I think the larger players are becoming more progressive. They're still shying away from digital currencies and blockchain. So I think they prefer to work with the existing networks that they have and just stay away from it entirely right now, if they can. It's sort of their first choice. I think that they realize it's pretty hard to innovate using kind of those existing networks. So the next level for them is more of a stable coin, or if they can write a contract on top of another asset that is stable or isn't tied to a cryptocurrency. They're more willing to do that. And you see that with Stellar or Ripple, and some of the variations of that they can do a little more in the comfort zone. And I think that there are some that are taking it to that next level and are a little more open-minded about it, that do talk to companies like us. We're not getting into the enterprise market right now because they're just too, I think, hesitant to get into digital currencies directly. But there's a whole lot of interest in what we're doing and opportunities to partner, but more around building more efficient kind of payment rails up to digital wallets and things like that. So I think Tether, Exos, things like that. Ripple and Stellar are making inroads. I don't see a whole lot of big banks thinking about building a blockchain-powered payout network that doesn't use correspondent banks. That's not happening. I think they're thinking about it, but they're not doing it. What I am seeing is a lot of sort of their trading desks and their institutional trading becoming more involved in trading the assets, which is part of it. So, but I don't think it's there yet with global payments. If that answers. So that was the last one. Or?
That's right. Yeah, that was the last one. I was going to say the real answer is they should use Bridge 21. But
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the time. Everybody now you know what Will looks like. You can find him at the summit during lunch, during breaks. Hit him up in chat. Like you said, you can just check for watching for fun.
Yeah.
So do that. Next round of applause. Thank you. Appreciate it.